Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned with the Robert E. Howard Show. It's time for the Robert E. Howard Show once again. Happy Sumerian September, everybody. And today, Roger and I will be talking about one of Robert E. Howard's greatest characters. That would be Borak, the Swift. Francis Xavier Gordon, an American from Texas who goes to the Middle East and has adventures in Afghanistan and around there in the Middle East. And they are amazing adventure stories. They're just fantastic. Borak is a character that appeared rather late in Robert E. Howard's career, created quite early. When Robert E. Howard was fairly young, he came up with the idea for the character, although he was not developed until much later into the character that he became. And he started appearing in 1934, 1935, and 1936. So the end of Robert E. Howard's career when he was at the height of his literary powers. And they're just fantastic stories. Just superb action stories. The Francis Xavier Gordon tales. This is a character that is not as well known as some of Robert E. Howard's other characters, of course Conan, but he's also not as well known as Solomon Kane or Cull or probably even Bran MacMorn. And I suspect this is due to the nature of the stories in that they are straight adventure stories. They are not fantasy. They are not horror. There are no supernatural elements in these stories. They are straight adventure tales. And they're amazing. They're just wonderful stories. Incredibly action-packed, fast-moving, violent. Oh my goodness, these are some of Robert E. Howard's most violent stories. Shockingly so at some points in the stories. It's great stuff. And Borak, Francis Xavier Gordon, is a really interesting character. For one thing, what's he doing in the Middle East anyway? So these stories take place in the early 20th century, up into the First World War and a little bit before that. Inspired by Lawrence of Arabia and some other real-life people, and also some of the stories of Talbot Mundy and others. These are just fantastic, fantastic adventure stories. And Borak, a Texas gunfighter who goes to the Middle East. Why? This is a different character than a lot of other Robert E. Howard characters with different motivations. One thing Robert E. Howard does not get enough credit for is that his characters are all different from each other. For years, there was this idea that promulgated by certain people like L. Sprague de Camp, the dreaded L. Sprague de Camp, the evil wizard who desecrated Robert E. Howard's Conan stories in the 60s. L. Sprague de Camp, who did not respect Robert E. Howard's writing at all, he would say things like, well, all Robert E. Howard characters are the same. And, you know, when he was messing about with the Conan series, L. Sprague de Camp did take an Borak story, Three-Bladed Doom, and turn it into a Conan story. Because after all, they're the same character. No, they're not. They're very different. And you can read the original, actual version of that story in this book. Borak and Other Desert Adventures. Wonderful book from Del Rey. Borak is different in that his motivations were different. The reason he did what he did was different than some of the other characters. He's often been described, I think, as a kind of mercenary or soldier of fortune, which is not really true. He certainly is not interested in money, so much, or treasure, as these stories are full of European uh, seekers of treasure. Uh, they're dastardly Europeans in this book who show up looking for money, treasure, power, and are perfectly happy to just kill anybody and cause all kinds of destruction to get these things. Whereas Francis Xavier Gordon doesn't really care. He's more interested in other things. His motivations are elsewhere. And this makes him actually a bit different than some other Robert E. Howard characters, of course. Conan, a thief, very self-interested Conan. And actually, there's another character at the end of this book. This particular book is El Borak and Other Desert Adventures. It has all the El Borak stories, but it also has a couple other characters. And one of these characters is Kirby O'Donnell. Kirby O'Donnell is another American in the Middle East having adventures. And I've heard people say, well, Kirby O'Donnell is just El Borak. He just has a different name. Nothing could be further from the truth. There are two characters with very different motivations. And in the first Kirby O'Donnell story, he is in a mysterious city, Shahrazar. And he's there specifically to steal treasure. He is a fortune hunter. He is out for treasure and out for loot. That is his motivation, at least in the beginning of the story. El Borak is different. There's one story that's really, really good. It's a really, really good story called Blood of the Gods. And Blood of the Gods is about El Borak having to go rescue a friend of his who was in great danger. This friend is a hermit and a mystic. He's living all on his own. And when he left, he took the blood of the gods, which are jewels, treasure, with him. And so now this guy is in trouble. And in this little paragraph of the story, it says, these jewels had not been distributed among the poor with all the rest of Al-Wazir's wealth. Gordon himself did not know what the man had done with them, nor did the American care. Greed was not one of his faults, and Al-Wazir was his friend. Francis Xavier Gordon is not in the Middle East for money or treasure. He's there because this is a place where he can be what he really is. Francis Xavier Gordon is a barbarian. At heart, he's a barbarian. And he is from the American West, but at this point, in the first decade of the 20th century, civilization had come to the West. It was becoming civilized, which was not for Francis Xavier Gordon. He wanted to live an adventurous life. He needed and craved action, which he gets plenty of. And he wanted to live free of the bounds of civilization. So in this way, he's very much a Robert E. Howard character. But this is his motivation. He goes to a place where he can live the way he wants to live. And he does. And so he goes to the Middle East, Afghanistan and surrounding areas, having adventures. He makes a lot of friends and a lot of deadly enemies. And he gets into one scrape after another and one adventure after another. He goes on many missions. Although he's not a government agent, he will occasionally work for a government if it will help the people, because he's actually a pretty bloody adventures aside. He is a pretty decent fellow, Francis Xavier Gordon, and he's very interested in justice, actually, and he will have his adventures mostly to rescue people, or to prevent harm, to prevent some dastardly villain from causing horrible problems and killing people and all of that. He's basically a hero in a way that some other characters can't be pinned down. Like Conan is not your traditional hero, for example. He is a hero, but he's not the traditional type. He's a very self-interested character, Conan. And a lot of his adventures are born from him trying to get money or power. Whereas Borak is different. And at the end of this story, in the on the last page, Borak is talking to his friend Al-Wazir. And Al-Wazir says, "I'm going back with you," said Al-Wazir. "My meditations didn't give me the gift of prophecy, but they convinced me, even before I got that rap on the head, that the best life a man can live is one of service to his fellow men, just as you do in your own way." And he says that to Borak. And it's true. Borak does live a life of service to other people in his own bloody way. Borak is enormously tough. He has become a legend to the locals in the area. Everybody knows who he is, even if they don't always recognize him when they see him. Everybody has heard of Borak the Swift. When Francis Xavier Gordon went to Afghanistan, he had to learn how to survive in this area, and he did. He is a survivor, and he's a great fighter, and he learned how to fight in Afghanistan and the surrounding areas. He was already a gunfighter, but he learned how to fight with a sword and everything. He learned how to survive in this area. He learned how to live with it in this area. He's incredibly tough, incredibly strong. He's a little guy compared to many Robert E. Howard characters, in that he is a man of middle height, which I'm assuming is about 5'8", somewhere around there, and slimmer than most Robert E. Howard's characters, although he's all muscle and incredibly strong, and his endurance is just off the charts. He can just keep going and going and going and going, Borak. He's just a fantastic character. Often he will go in disguise on various missions, although he does not stay in disguise. There is Kirby O'Donnell, the character I mentioned that appears in 3 stories at the end of this book. And Kirby O'Donnell lives in his disguise. He's always in disguise as a native. Borak is not like that. Borak will be in disguise when he needs to be. But the rest of the time, he's clearly what he is, an American adventurer. And there's a story in here, Sons of the Hawk, where the main point of view character is a different guy, a different American, who's not nearly as tough as Borak, who was immediately captured and taken to a mysterious city. And he comes across Borak, who he's been looking for, but he doesn't recognize him because he's in disguise. He's disguised as a native, a very flamboyant one. And when he's in disguise, he gives you a sense of being kind of an Errol Flynn type swashbuckling character, which is very different than Francis Xavier Gordon's normal personality. And you see that as soon as his disguise is of no more use, he goes back to being Borak, Francis Xavier Gordon, and his personality is completely different. He's all business. And that's one of the things about him, and is he's very focused on whatever he's trying to do. So the things you learn about this character, you learn kind of on the run. He doesn't talk about himself. He's very focused on what he's doing. Whatever his mission is, whatever he has to accomplish, all his energy is focused on that. And so we get little bits of his backstory here and there. Everything we learn about Borak, we hear from other characters, little snippets here and there, or Robert E. Howard as the narrator mentioning just a bit here and there. But he's sort of mysterious in that way. And you kind of have to figure out, why he's there and why he's doing what he's doing. Clearly, the main reason he's there is that he is an adrenaline junkie who needs adventure. He's like Solomon Kane in that way. And Solomon Kane did what he did for more than one reason, but mostly because he had a wandering foot and had a lust for adventure, which he himself did not realize. Solomon Kane thought he was doing what he's doing purely for a need to right wrongs and to seek justice. He had a religious mission, Solomon Kane, but he wasn't really self-aware. He didn't really understand himself why he was doing what he was doing. Borak does. He seems like a pretty self-aware guy. He knows why he's there. He knows what he's doing. And this is the only place in the world where he can live the type of life he wants to live. Of course, the Afghanistan and the Middle East in these stories is completely a product of Robert E. Howard's imagination. He had never been to the Middle East, of course. And so it's really impressive just how realistic some of the things in these stories seem. He had such a vivid imagination. And one of the great things about Robert E. Howard's writing is that when you read a Robert E. Howard story, you're not just reading it very often, you're experiencing the story. And you get that sense in these Borak stories. These are adventures that you completely fall into. And the action in these stories is off the charts. I mean, there are some action scenes in here that are just so harrowing and so vividly described. It's superb. It's superb stuff. Extremely violent. And like I was shocked at periods at some of the violence in these stories. Either I had forgotten the level of violence, or perhaps in the earlier editions, some of that might have been edited. I'm not sure. But yeah, there's a lot of that. A lot of violence in these stories. And the villains are just incredibly dastardly. They have no wizardry to rely on. But incredibly dangerous. Civilization itself is constantly at risk. And Francis Xavier Gordon is just such a great character. I highly, highly, highly recommend these stories. This is some of Robert E. Howard's best work as far as just pure adventure and a superb character. It's great fun. So Borak, you should read this, Roger. You should read Borak and Other Desert Adventures. Incredible stuff. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.